Hello, and welcome to our second installment of Venice Island From a Distance. Venice Island is a community-based performing arts center that believes in the power of arts and entertainment as a way of bringing people together and fostering community. As such, we have a responsibility to amplify the important work of marginalized voices in our community and to advance the conversation surrounding race and the arts, a conversation which has reached a fever pitch in light of recent civil unrest. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we are unable to have their voices live on our stage. So instead, every Monday night through the end of August, we will be posting informal interviews with artists, collaborators, and voices in our city who have much to say about the role of arts and culture in the midst of racial, health, political, and financial crises. I am your host today, Ryan Rebel. I do not have an official position at Venice Island, but I am a freelance technician, co-founding member of Shoebox Theatre Collective, which operates out of Venice Island. I produce work with Shoebox, the annual short theater festival, and I direct there as well. If you want to find out about Shoebox, you can go to shoeboxtheatrecollective.org. My guest today is Ang Bey. You could find them at their website, angelaantoinettebey.com.
Or angbey.com.
Or you could Google them. They are a wonderful playwright, actor, director, performing artist in general. I first saw them perform years ago with Shakespeare in Clark Park. Since then, they have had, a lot of very exciting opportunities with other theaters like Interact and Theater Exile and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we can start this interview by talking about, I guess, how we got to this interview. And in the process, you could also talk a little bit about your work and the advocacy that you do.
Sure. Yeah. My name is Ang Bey. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I will say that. I grew up in Philadelphia, born and raised Southwest Philly, and I've been performing since middle school, early or even late elementary school. But how we got here to this interview with Ryan Rebel today, I actually saw a piece that Ryan had directed before I knew him years ago with the Revamp Collective, and did like a yellow wallpaper piece. It was really, really great. It was my favorite piece of the night. And then later that year, I was a part of the Shoebox Festival, Short Theater Festival, with my friend Arthur Robinson in a piece that he wrote and also directed. Still didn't know Ryan then, didn't really make the connection that you had anything to do with the Revamp piece or Shoebox. And then later that summer at a party, we actually met and became friends. And more than friends, I guess.
Yeah, it's a bit surreal doing this interview because we're partners and also regular collaborators and friends and have known each other for quite a while. And now we are in this formal, informal setting talking with each other. I'm excited. But yeah, go ahead, talk more about... So you were invited to this interview series a couple weeks ago?
And a lot of my work that I've been doing over the last several years, I would say maybe the last 4 years, has really been focused around an artistic mission that amplifies decolonization and radical healing within the Black community. And so I was asked to do this interview, and I was really excited about the racial aspects specifically because there has been so much civil unrest that people have taken note of lately, but it's happened, since way before I was born. And it's exciting to suddenly, however frustrating, be given a platform to talk about these sorts of things, because as a Black artist, it's really hard for me. And I'm sure a lot of people can liken their experience to mine of when to stay silent, when to hold people and institutions accountable, and when to, really be often the only voice in a room speaking up against injustice that you see. And after the speaking up, trying to have some sort of actionable plan forward is also a really, really large component of what it takes to be an equitable theater artist And it's doubly frustrating as a Black theater artist when there's already limited opportunities. So being asked to do this interview was really, really great for me because it like punctuates my experience as a Black theater artist really well, because I want to be doing this kind of work and having these kinds of conversations now that we're in a really great position to have, you know, the world change and shift and morph to serve more people.
Yeah, this work is important and exciting, and I think probably very frustrating as well. Your voice is one that is very much in demand right now, and there are several reasons for that. One is that you're incredibly talented, and you're sort of a rising star in the theater community, whether you would admit that openly or not. Another reason is that you are willing to be outspoken about these things, and kind of put your cred on the line in that way. And another reason is because you are Black and trans and non-binary, and this is both an opportunity for the theater community, the very white theater community, entrenched theater community, to learn, but also there is a sort of a fetishization or tokenization of certain identity categories that always goes hand in hand with this. I would love to hear you talk about that in any way you would like to.
Yeah, I mean, part of the question of being a Black artist in this white institution is every time I audition for a gig or get offered a gig, I'm always thinking about how many other people look like me, not only in the cast, but behind the scenes. And when we think about things like colorblind casting versus color conscious casting and buzzwords like diversity and inclusion, the kind of utopia that I want to build in the theater community reaches farther beyond that. Because when you think about like, oh, tokenization, like I'm gonna cast 2 Black people in this Shakespeare or Greek show. What does your production team look like? What does your arts administration team look like? I've worked for a lot of companies where they've been mostly white, if not all white, and that you're still being diverse and including, but the system isn't built to support those people. And I've been in several positions where I felt marginalized in diverse casts because, you know, again, you're then speaking for your entire race. If you like, if you need to say something that is maybe not a popular opinion for whatever reason. As a trans actor, this is another question of like gender of roles that I get offered and genders of roles when I audition. I have different philosophies on that than any other trans person because we're all different, we're not a monolith. And I have very complicated feelings about it because of my Blackness. And so often, you know, as I walk into a room, people don't see a trans actor, they see a tall Black femme or woman, see a tall Black woman. And I've been cast in roles that, you know, exploit those stereotypes about Black womanhood. And it's like, it's a very like tenuous sort of like entangled thing because as a politicized body on the stage and as an actor specifically, I'm often wondering, how seen am I really going to be in this production? And that starts from like, hey, we want you to audition for this show. Here are the sides. I'm doing research about the company. I'm looking at your season. Often I'm disappointed. I go, okay, well, I'm adjacent to whiteness in all of these ways. I'm college educated. I'm lighter skinned. I know I have a lot of like white friends in the theater community. Maybe I can like push forward a little bit in the way of social justice for this organization, but do I want to take on that emotional labor? And there's all these questions about like what it means to be often the only Black person involved in a production. And that's definitely fetishistic and it's definitely tokenistic.
What you're saying reminds me of a very beautiful post written by Lindsay Smiling on Facebook about a month ago. Do you remember this post?
Yeah. Lindsay is fabulous. He's a Black actor in the city. He was posting about the Lantern Theater Company's production of Othello that he was going to star in.
Yeah, he was talking about, if I remember correctly, being the only Black voice in a room that was trying very hard to push the adaptation in a racially conscious direction rather than just a diverse direction. And he was talking about the hardships of that. And even that process, which he seemed to feel positively about because the white people in the room were listening to him, was very like trying because as the voice always pushing for these things, there's a lot of exhaustion bound up in that. So even in a process that goes positively, there can be burnout, there could be feelings of neglect or dissociation. And
Right.
you've talked so many times about being in processes run by white teams that are woke or progressive, but still can't see these things.
Yes, yes. And I think too, and I relate wholeheartedly to Lindsay's post, and his story is not unlike many Black theater artists or BIPOC theater artists in Philadelphia or even internationally. And I can speak to several experiences. I just graduated from college at Ursinus College, and I had a really, really abusive sort of experience in the theater department there for the institution, because the institution was not built to support me in the kind of work that I was wanting to do, which is really just challenging the racism within the institution. And I think, you know, when we think about woke theater companies and that as like a branding, it's hypocritical, and it's also really, really challenging to then be, you know, one of the quote unquote like woke bodies in a process. Like I have been a lot, like Lindsay was in at the Lantern as a Black man, and then suddenly feel like the weight of the world and trying to like, you know, push forward a little bit more accountability from these institutions and from your castmates and from your director and from, you know, your producers. So yeah, I mean, it's a dance, and it's exhausting. It is exhausting. You use that word, and I've, you know, rejected roles because I felt it was going to be too exhausting, or because I've learned that I was the only person of color in a cast. I've also not spoken up when I felt victimized and marginalized in processes and that have been abusive. And, you know, there's this myth that maybe Black actors in the city don't talk to each other, but we're all friends with each other, and we know, like we definitely know what's going on, and we're much more like hip to the nonsense than I think we lead on, because we need to get jobs and we need to, you know, pay our rent and do what we love ultimately, like have this weird cognitive dissonance of like being a performer and then also knowing that you're not, you know, serving your community directly, or sometimes in no way if you're working for very white companies. It's so yeah, it's exhausting. It's exhausting. And I don't want to like undermine either how resilient Black artists in the city are for constantly doing this emotional, physical, and mental dance of wanting to have a career in the arts and knowing that all the cards are stacked against us. And I'd also want to like call attention to Black theater companies that have been really instrumental in trying to get our voices heard and have produced really great work. Theater in the X, First World Theater Company. Oh man, like there are so many in the city, and so many smaller organizations in the city that have done a lot of great work to amplify Black voices that unfortunately aren't getting the notoriety because they don't have the 501c3 or the relationships to large donors that are white. And this is the institution, this is the system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sure seems like most of the exciting like decolonizing work is coming from either small groups or individuals.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that you have mentioned to me that as as a white person, I also, just a quick tangent, wanted to say that I didn't introduce you with your pronouns at the top, and I didn't introduce myself with my pronouns. Mine are he, him, his.
Thanks.
This is one of the ways that, like, as a cis white person, that like my pronouns are kind of invisible to me because they feel like the norm, and so I forget to bring them up, right? And so it happens with race too. I would have never picked up on something that you have taught me about, which is the way that theater companies can sort of harvest extra dramaturgical labor from BIPOC in their processes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that white people don't pick up on it because we are taught to pat ourselves on the back for listening to Black or POC artists at all. And so can you talk about what this like sort of invisible labor feels like how you experience it?
Yeah, and this again is fraught because it's this kind of invisible labor and listening and interpersonal accountability within communities. It's what's ultimately going to save us, I think. What feels yucky about being harvested in those specific ways as an artist is when you walk into a process, you're signing a contract to do one specific job usually. And so when you're an actor specifically, it can feel very fetishistic and not good because you're already putting your physical body, your emotional health, you're bringing your vessel to the process to embody a story that isn't yours already. And as a Black artist, when if I'm doing a Shakespeare show or if I'm doing, I did Eurydice in college. I keep bringing up college, but it was such a transformative experience in a lot of ways for me as an artist and like coming to my mission statement. But I did a production of Eurydice in college, my first year of college, and the first ad I saw for the audition had a white woman as Eurydice. And so walking into that audition, I was like, there's no way that I'm going to be cast. And then I was, and then they didn't change the ad. And there was a campaign at my college to, at one of my really great friends, LaShante, like put my face on the white in the elevator with the umbrella, and that little like things like that. And I'm sure that that the individuals that were responsible for they're making that poster, and then for not making the decision to remake the poster after I was cast, I'm sure there was no like malcontent or venom in that oversight, but racism and internalized biases are like malignant tumors are the ones that are dangerous, right? Or
yeah,
malignant,
that's the bad one.
Yeah, they're like malignant tumors. They really are. And it's not just for me as an artist trying to play Eurydice and trying to show my family, hey, I'm in this show. And then they're like, who is this white woman on the cover? It's also something that is bad for the white folk that perpetuate it, and for people of color that perpetuate it. But it is something that narrows your vision, like capital V vision, in such a way that it's like dangerous and violent. And that was a small thing, but someone somewhere thought, oh, Eurydice's white, duh. And that there's a problem there, and so I am very generous. I am a very generous person in process.
This is true.
I am so generous. And I love white people. Some of my best friends are white. My partner is. A lot of some of my chosen family is white, and I can do that. I'm in a place where I can do that. But what I see a lot of, and what I'm frustrated about most with social media activism from white folk these days, is like this sort of virtue signaling that sort of like necessitates some sort of reward, or necessitates friendship from Black folk or BIPOC folk. And that's not why you should be in advocacy or activism. That's not the reason why you should, be a good person. You're not like, we want to be able to create spaces where I, as an actor, don't have to sign a contract that also says I'm your diversity consultant, in order to feel like empowered to say, hey, what you just did was racist in the space, or hey, what you just did is a microaggression. Can we talk about it? we want to get to that utopia where like a Black actor can, you know, walk into maybe a predominantly white cast. In my utopia, there wouldn't be any of that, but let's just say hypothetically, can walk into a predominantly white space and know that people are actually listening and actually holding themselves accountable and actually doing the interpersonal work to undo all that inherent bias and yuckiness inside of themselves so they can be better members of the community. So I want to be able to walk into a process and like, yeah, let's talk about Emmett Till and like how years ago we're seeing the same lynchings happening in 2020 and let's talk about that. And I want to be ready to like have those really hard conversations in theater specifically, because we need to, because it informs everything that we do as artists, down to our season selection, down to the kinds of funders that we, you know, apply to for grants. Like, we need to be able to talk about this and have these kinds of conversations. But currently, as it stands, I only work with my closest collaborators are people that are in my community that align with me spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically. And that we have this accountability that isn't just yes manning. And I see a lot of that in theater communities in Philly, especially white theater communities in Philly, of like, hashtag Black Lives Matter. Oh yeah, great, Black Lives Matter, but like, where's your action plan?
Mm-hmm.
And didn't you just do this thing last season in this show that kicked up a lot of dirt and you haven't publicly apologized about that? So where's the accountability there? How did you grow from December to spring of the next year? Like what happened? And who are you asking to hold you accountable? Is it just people that look like you? Or is it people from the communities that you've affected? And that's hard to admit that you're wrong. But until we can get to a place where that kind of accountability is standard, you're going to be harvesting our spiritual and emotional wealth as Black artists. We're walking to a space and every time we have to ask the question of how racist, on a scale of 1 to 10, how racist is this process going to be, and can I withstand it?
That is beautifully said. You know, we're going to have to take the pull quote from that. I love white people, Ang Bey. That's going to be the pull quote for the interview.
Oh yeah, you would love that as a pull quote.
It's sort of a joke, but also white people in power constantly reframing, taking out of context, making safe, powerful words from the Black community. And I do want to get to that in a minute. But first, I'm glad that you brought up Ursinus and your college experience. I first met you towards the end of your time there. And to me, it seems like a whole lot of your thoughts, ideas, and ideals about everything we're talking about right now was shaped out of the fiery forge of frustration that you experienced at Ursinus.
It was anger. It was rage.
It does not feel like a good place for all these reasons in my brief time that I've spent there. And there was, if you want to talk about this, there was a hate crime that happened at Ursinus that ended up tremendously influencing your artistic career.
Yeah. So I did a play. I started writing a play called the Medusa Play my sophomore year of college. And it actually talks about, and the play is about a Black femme who, gets cast in this devised theater piece about the myth of Medusa in this like all-white devising collective, and the racism and the tainted allyship that comes out of that process and how it affects her as an artist and as a person. And ultimately, she decides that she doesn't need the validation of white folk or the white gaze to be a whole person. And that the monster inside of her, which is this rage that I alluded to, that I was feeling all through college, is not a bad thing, and to embrace that, especially as a Black woman, she is in the show. And so I did that. I started writing that piece under the mentorship of the theater department. And it was extraordinarily abusive experience for a lot of reasons. I don't want to like harp on that because I feel like I talk so much about it already. But after the Medusa play, I knew that I needed to distance myself from the production that was going to be happening that spring in September, the academic production. And I knew that I needed to do something as a senior my last year to leave a legacy on the campus of holding each other accountable as it pertains to racism. And so I applied for this grant as an individual to do a project called the White Feather Project. And it was a piece about a hate crime that happened on my campus in which a white student who recently has been called out, like very recently within the last few weeks, like peed in the snow, the N-word, nigger, spelled it out. And there were friends that were around him who didn't come forward. And he ended up staying on campus and he was able to graduate this year, and the school like hid that from the Black students specifically, but really everyone. And when that happened, I did a devised theater piece, devised from interviews. So really we took the found text from interviews that we conducted in Black and white affinity groups on the campus, students, faculty, staff, deans, everyone contributed to these group interview processes where we talked about racism at Ursinus. And we ended up producing a piece with this grant, 2 outside actors, Quentin and Bonnie. And then I had a collaborator named Rachel Cericio. We did a piece and a performance on campus, and then again at the Shoebox Theatre Festival that year. And it was one of the best artistic experiences I've had. And I'm very proud of that project. It was extraordinarily powerful, I feel, even though I'm biased. I directed it. And
sure. I mean, I saw both iterations, and I agree that it was powerful and very different each time, because the first one was on campus, and it felt very much like a confrontation to the campus culture that incubated this sort of vile racism. And even more of a slap in the face finding out now years later that the school knew who did it and covered it up while they were watching you make this piece about it.
And the stage manager that I worked with, who I thought was a really great friend and ally, came out and said that she knew the entire time and did not tell us. She told me a few weeks ago. And she was in like these very intense conversations that we were having as a cast. She like looked at all the material. It was an extreme betrayal, and I can't believe that she stayed silent for this long. And it's not even anger that I'm feeling. It's sadness. It's deep sadness. And this is what I mean by racism being a virus for white people too, because like she was saying in her really long apology that she didn't want to call out her friend. Like she didn't want to, implicate, she wanted to give him room to grow. And she wanted to, in a way, avenge herself by signing on to this project with us none the wiser. She wanted to understand why it was such a big deal to the Black community that we were like offended by this hate crime and why we were doing this project. And all of this growth is great. This is what I mean by like, God damn, am I utopia? Like, first of all, hate crimes like this wouldn't happen, but this sort of restorative justice through artistic processes maybe still would. But she had to lie and withhold that, and then our consent was violated. In the amount of information and the amount of our souls that we've shared with her, she then felt guilty about it and then ultimately apologized for. So it's a very complicated fallout.
Yeah, redemption without consent. I want to jump forward in time now because we don't have much time left on this interview, and I would love to. Well, I will keep talking to you about all these issues, but. Yeah, White Feather Project, a way for you to begin with anger, which is powerful and necessary to interrogate institutions. And the Medusa play is another ongoing project of yours.
Yes.
That began at Ursinus, was impeded in a lot of ways at Ursinus, And then we met and we concocted the idea to do a new version of it with the Shoebox Theatre Collective at Venice Island.
Yep.
A production that I thought was really successful and taught me a lot. We directed it together. And you sort of shifted your focus from college with that new adaptation to the Philadelphia theater community and whiteness in that institution. So I'd love to finish off by talking about that. There's a long series of examples of theater companies pushing back against critique in Philadelphia. Philadelphia Theater Company last year, I believe, were the ones shutting down a lot of this discussion. And right now it's Playpen, who are producing a crop of 7 plays. Only one of them is a Black playwright. And they were called out about this in conjunction with a publication that advertised them producing new work with pictures exclusively of Black artists. And about an hour ago, the most recent development was the person whose show that was that they were picturing came out and is talking about how they impeded a lot of the work that he wanted to do. And he asked that they do not use those pictures anymore. So this is an example of an organization that is purporting to be progressive and make progressive work, but has a lily white behind the scenes team and is putting people of color to the front to like absorb the like marketing and like get cred. And it's not, it's really every major theater in Philadelphia in some way or another. So if you want to talk about that, talk about how you feel navigating being an artist that isn't choosing to navigate this terrain, and also a tall order, but talk about diversity versus decolonization and punitive versus restorative justice.
This is an example of how we ask Black femmes for a lot.
I know, right? It's too much. It's too much.
It's a lot of labor.
Pick just like one thing.
I can say one thing that'll probably sum up all of that.
Great.
A really great friend and collaborator of mine, Nia Benjamin, and Sam Tower also run in conjunction Ninth Planet. And a little while ago, maybe like over a year ago, Nia posted or sent in their newsletter a call to action for white artistic directors specifically to step down and to bring up BIPOC artists and teach them the ropes, learn the ropes of what it takes to be an artistic administrator. And seeing that newsletter, I was still in college, and reading that and knowing Nia as sort of like a huge like mentor, friend, cool person in the community through Philadelphia Young Playwrights. It's an organization that I love. I was like, whoa, this is inspiring. And yes, Nia is right. When we think about like diversity and inclusion, what are you including? Who are you excluding and what are you including them into? That's the first question. You're including Black people or BIPOC people, queer artists, into a white system that is inherently abusive. Inclusion doesn't work anymore. We need to break down those institutions, and the way that we do that is by giving Black artists and Black administrators and Black educators executive leadership positions, and white people giving up their power in order to do that. Period. And we need to be willing to invest in that as a strategy and creating a more equitable, utopic world for the theater community. And that's what it is. So when I think about decolonization, it's exactly that. It's removing whiteness in whatever ways we can from the systems and the shows and the productions and, all of it that they occupy and dominate. It means not toting around your Black staff members and cast members as trophies in grant writing or in Metro Philly articles. And I just want to be clear, Playplan is not the only organization that has done this. I that's happened to me with companies and people that I hold very close to my heart, and I would still call friends and acquaintances. The only difference of that is I have taken the extra labor of interpersonally calling those people out instead of putting it on social media, which I'm not. I think that's still a very viable and very correct thing to do. I wish I were braver, honestly, in doing that. But Playplan is not the only organization in Philadelphia that is doing this and has done this.
Yeah,
everyone,
absolutely.
Every company that I've worked for is accountable in this.
Yeah,
so, you can look on my website if you have questions about that specifically.
There was another call-out post. Interact posted an image of 20 plus theater leaders all discussing the current moment, which is civil unrest, racial protest, overwhelmingly white picture. And somebody posted it and called out behind the scenes, Interact's full-time staff, 83% white, Wilma's 80%, Arden's 82%, all these like...
I've worked with Interact, I've worked with Wilma. I love a lot of the people that work for that company, for those companies. They're all are like, most of them are all white and they have really good intentions. And I would call a lot of them my friends, and we have like, yeah, this is like tenuous stuff. You're right.
It's difficult contradictions, and we have to learn to sit and live with those contradictions. And I think white people need to be ready for a lot more pain in growth than they currently are.
Because we have given so much love as Black artists and Black creators in this city. We love, like, there's been so much love and grace that you don't even know about. And I'm coming from a place of love and grace because I have the energy and capacity for it, but not everybody will, and that is still valid.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm really excited to see what happens after this time. I'm really excited for you all to listen to us really and do that interpersonal connective tissue, deep tissue work for yourselves, so we can start making the theater company that we say that we have in grants and in our mission statements.
Yes, hell yes, in fact. Thank you so much for talking today. It's been great. The Zoom gods tell me we have a little over a minute left. Please plug what you would like to plug, and then I will outro us.
Great. Go to my website, angebey.com. I have a couple of plays coming up. I'm in Jouska Playwrights with the wonderful Simpatico Theater Company and a bunch of other Black artists. I'm also in the Women's Theater Festival. I'm doing a show there.
Yeah, and Ange is an extremely helpful and important and crucial member of Shoebox Theatre Collective as well. Check out our website. We'll be making more work when we can make more work.
And holding ourselves accountable.
Holding ourselves accountable. We'll keep helping each other do that all the time. Thank you all for watching. Thank you to this week's restaurant partner, the Manayunk Tavern. Great place. I love it. I go there all the time.
Really
please,
tasty.
Yeah, it is. Join us next Monday at 7:30 as Noah Herman interviews Chris Herman, Executive Director of Yes and Collaborative Arts. Different Herman spelling, by the way. Thank you so much, Ange, and take care.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
They force their power and talk about freedom. They lie about liberty and use force as religion. It's us against them and we're fighting.